To begin at the beginning is the only sure way to reach the end. Any other course is a mere building upon sand. When I look back across the decades to my earliest youth in Allegheny City, I do not find my thoughts dwelling upon the boards of great corporations or the management of vast steelworks. Instead, I find myself standing once more in the dim light of a small cellar, tending a bobbin boy's task in a cotton factory. I was myself a sweeper of offices, a messenger boy, and a manual laborer, and I look back upon those days of earnest, honest toil with a satisfaction that no later success in money-getting has ever surpassed or even equaled. There is a sacredness in the first earned penny that the millions of the financier can never possess. It is in the humble performance of even the most menial task that the seeds of future usefulness are sown. The young man who enters a business house today often looks with disdain upon the broom or the errand book, yet he forgets that the ladder of success must be climbed rung by rung, and the lowest rung is the most essential of all. No young man should ever be too high for his work. If he considers himself too grand to perform the simple duties of his station with excellence, he proves himself too small for the responsibilities of the partnership he desires. The boy who has the genius of the future partner in him will never hesitate to try his hand at the broom. Indeed, he will sweep that floor so much better than it has ever been swept before that the eyes of his superiors will be drawn to him as if by a magnet. I remember well my start as a messenger in the telegraph office at Pittsburgh. I did not ask what my fellows were doing. I asked what more could be done. I learned the streets of the city by heart. I stayed late to learn the art of the telegraph key. I made myself indispensable, not by demanding more, but by giving more. This is the only path. The boss is always looking for the man who does not need to be told twice, and the youth who does his work with a cheerful spirit and a determination to master every detail, however trivial, is the one who will eventually be called to sit in the councils of the firm. The great trouble with the young men of today is that they are too often looking for the short count or the lucky strike. There is no such thing in a healthy business life. Success is the slow fruit of character, and character is forged in the fires of early, humble industry. To start at the bottom is not a misfortune, it is a profound advantage. It grants a man a knowledge of the rank and file that he can never acquire from the height of a director's chair. He who has handled the broom knows the heart of the man who handles it now, and when he rises to command, he does so with a sympathy and a clarity of vision that ensures a lasting and harmonious enterprise. You must focus your soul upon the work at hand. Do not let your mind wander to the distractions of the world or the follies of the spendthrift. Be a king in your own province, even if that province is but a corner of a warehouse. The man who is useful to his employer is the man who treats his employer's business as if it were his own, and who understands that the only way to rise is to lift the business up with him. It is this spirit of service, this mastery of the small things, that prepares the mind for the great weight of partnership. If you cannot be trusted with the broom, how shall the world trust you with the gold of the community? Therefore, embrace the beginning. Rejoice in the humble task. For in the lowliness of your start lies the very height of your eventual triumph. The true partnership, the only one capable of sustaining the weight of our modern industrial civilization, is a triple alliance. In this vast machinery of enterprise, there are three essential elements. There is capital, there is business ability, and there is skilled labor. These three are the legs of a tripod, and if any one of these three legs of the stool fail, the whole structure must crumble into ruin. It is a mathematical certainty that you cannot support the weight of a great industry upon one or even two legs. The third is indispensable to the equilibrium of the whole. We often hear the foolish cry that these forces are in natural conflict, but nothing could be further from the truth. They are not enemies, but auxiliaries who must stand or fall together in a common cause. Consider the nature of capital. It is but the saved-up labor of the past, the tool which enables the worker to produce more today than he could yesterday. Consider business ability. It is the guiding mind that sees the market, organizes the furnace, and steers the ship through the storms of financial panic. And consider skilled labor. It is the sturdy arm and the practiced eye without which the factory is but a silent graveyard of cold iron. The interest of one is the interest of all, and he who seeks to array one against the other is an enemy to the progress of the race. When the laborer suffers, the capital which employs him eventually wastes away. When capital is driven into hiding by unjust demands, the laborer finds his heart cold and is covered bare. There is no victory for one over the other that does not carry within it the seeds of a shared defeat. I have seen the disastrous effects of the strike and the lockout, and I tell you, they are the remnants of a primitive age. In the enlightened partnership of the future, there is no room for the spirit of the combatant, but only for the spirit of the collaborator. How can one say which of these three is the most important? You might as well ask which leg of a three-legged stool is the most vital, or which organ of the human body is the most necessary for life. If capital refuses its office, labor starves. If labor refuses its office, capital decays. If business ability is lacking, both are led to certain destruction. They are tied together by a golden cord of mutual dependence. The great industrial enterprises of our age are not the private property of any one man. They are great social instruments that thrive only when every member of the alliance, from the director in the counting house to the man at the forge, recognizes that he is a partner in a magnificent whole. Let no man deceive you with the talk of class warfare. There are no classes in this republic. There are only fellow citizens in different stages of development. The laborer of today is the capitalist of tomorrow, and the manager of the works was, as likely as not, the apprentice of yesterday. We must move forward together, with a clear understanding that any injury done to one part of this triple alliance is an injury done to the entire body of society. It is only through this harmony, this perfect adjustment of the three forces, that we can hope to see the continued advancement of our civilization and the steady improvement of the condition of all men. In this age of vast establishments, characterized by the concentration of thousands of workmen under a single roof, a change of most serious import has occurred in the relations between the employer and the employed. We have lost that personal touch, that neighborly recognition, which in former days bound the master and the man together in a common bond of human sympathy. Today, the owner is often but a name to the workman, and the workman but a number to the owner. They have become too much like strangers, separated by a gulf of mutual ignorance, and where ignorance dwells, suspicion is never far behind. We must labor with all our might to restore that feeling of mutuality that once existed in the small shops of our fathers. In those simpler times, the employer sat at the same bench as his apprentices. He knew their families, their joys, and their hardships. There was a unity of spirit because there was a unity of presence. While we cannot return to the primitive conditions of the past, for the law of competition and the requirements of modern civilization demand the large-scale production of our great works, we can and must retain the spirit of that old relationship. We must find a way to bridge the chasm. The manager who confers oftenest with his men will find the least trouble. I have always found that the American working man is a reasonable being. If you approach him with a spirit of fairness and lay the cards of the business upon the table, he is quick to understand the necessities of the situation. It is the aloofness of the employer, the keep-at-a-distance policy, that breeds the agitator and the strike. When a manager shuts himself in a distant office and communicates only through cold mandates, he invites friction. But when he goes among his men, listens to their grievances, and explains the difficulties of the market, the myth of the master disappears. The man is no longer seen as a mere cog in a machine, nor the employer as a tyrant of capital. Instead, the man is seen as a brother and a fellow worker. There is no substitute for the personal relation. I attribute the success of the various enterprises with which I have been associated not to my own ability, but to the fact that I surrounded myself with men who were my friends, and that we in turn sought to make every workman feel that he was a partner in our progress. We must treat our employees not as a labor cost to be reduced, but as human souls to be respected. Trust is a multiplier of enterprise. When a workman knows that his employer has his best interests at heart, he gives not only his hand, but his heart to his work. Let us strive, therefore, to break down the artificial barriers that the complexity of modern business has erected. Let the employer be accessible. Let the workman be heard. Let us foster that union of hearts, which is more powerful than any legal contract. For when we stand face to face, the imaginary grievances of the stranger vanish in the light of the shared purpose of brothers.
It is only through this restoration of personal sympathy and mutual confidence that we can hope to solve the industrial problems of our time and ensure the steady, peaceful advancement of the entire social fabric.
Trust is the very foundation upon which the fabric of enterprise is built. Without it, the most ingenious machines and the most abundant capital are but useless heaps of matter. In the conduct of great affairs, we look not for the man with the most gold, but for the man whom we can trust to be true to his word and faithful to his trust. It is not capital that your seniors require so much, as it is the man who has proved his character and his habits in the day of small things. Money is a tool that any hand can grasp, but character is a monument that only a lifetime of integrity can erect. I have often said that if all our steel mills and machinery were taken from us, but our organization, our men of character, remained, we could rebuild the entire business in a few short years. But if we kept the mills and lost the men of trust, the business would soon pass into other hands. The world is crying out for the man of sterling worth. To the young man of ability and willing disposition, the doors of partnership never close. They swing easier upon their hinges today than ever before for those who have earned the confidence of their fellows. The path is open and the rewards are certain for him who understands that his reputation for honesty is his most valuable asset. Consider the youth who enters a counting house. His seniors are watching him, though he may not know it. They are not looking for brilliance alone, for brilliance without character is a dangerous fire. They are looking for the man who is on time, the man who is temperate, and the man who regards his promise as a sacred bond. When the time comes to expand the firm, do they look for a stranger with a heavy purse? No, they look among their own ranks for the assistant who has made their interests his own. They seek the man who has proved that he can be trusted with the keys to the warehouse before they give him the keys to the safe. In this republic, the self-made man is the rule, not the exception. The great captains of industry did not begin as heirs to fortunes. They began as heirs to a legacy of trust. They built their credit by slow degrees, demonstrating through years of service that they possessed the moral restraint and the unwavering steadiness required of a leader. Financial independence is the result of such a life. It comes to the man who understands that trust is a multiplier of enterprise, that when men can rely upon one another, the friction of business is removed and the speed of progress is increased tenfold. Therefore, let every young man realize that he is writing his own testimonial every day. Every task well done, every word truly spoken, and every temptation resisted is a stone laid in the foundation of his future partnership. Do not be discouraged if the reward seems slow in coming. The world cannot do without the man of character. If you possess it, you are already a partner in the great work of civilization, and the formal recognition of your status is but a matter of time. Earn the confidence of your fellows by being useful to them, and you will find that the highest places in the empire of business are waiting for you. A good partner is distinguished by one infallible mark. He is the man who does something beyond his task. The world is full of those who are willing to perform the work for which they are paid, who arrive at the appointed hour and depart the moment the bell rings, having given exactly what the contract demands and not one jot more. Such men may be respectable, they may be honest, but they will never be partners. They are the 10-to-4 men, and they remain cogs in the machinery while others rise to direct it. The true youth of destiny does not ask, "What must I do for my employer?" in a spirit of calculation. Instead, he asks, "What can I do?" with the fervor of a man who has made his employer's interests his own. He is the man who stays awake to study how to advance the interests of the firm while others sleep or seek the fleeting pleasures of the theater and the tavern. When I was a young messenger boy, I did not find my duties ended when the telegrams were delivered. I stayed in the office to master the clicking language of the key. I rose before the sun to memorize the names and locations of every business house in Pittsburgh so that I might find my way faster than any other lad. I was not seeking to get ahead through some stroke of fortune. I was seeking to be of greater use. This is the secret that the mediocre mind never grasps, that the only way to command a higher station is to overflow the one you currently occupy. You must perform the duties of your present office so well and with such a surplus of energy and intelligence that you eventually burst the bounds of your position. Such a man attracts attention,
Not by loud speech, not by self-advertisement or the fawning of the sycophant, but by a quiet and invincible determination to be of greater use to the world than his station requires. There is a genius of common sense in the business world that is quick to recognize the youth who is always on the spot. Your seniors are constantly on the lookout for the individual who can take a burden off their shoulders. When the manager sees a young man who has anticipated a need, who has corrected an error before it was noticed, or who has suggested a small economy in the works, that young man is marked for promotion as surely as the sun rises. He has demonstrated that he possesses the commercial instinct, the ability to see the business as a living whole. The true partner understands that service is the foundation of all lasting wealth. He does not seek to take from the firm, but to add to it. He knows that by making the firm more prosperous, more efficient, and more useful to the public, he is building the very structure that will one day house his own fortune. This is not the language of modern productivity. It is the ancient and honorable language of mastery. It is the realization that a man's life is measured by his usefulness to his fellows. To do more than is required is not a burden. It is the highest privilege of the aspiring soul. It is the path by which the servant becomes the master and the employee becomes the partner. Therefore, look not at the clock, but at the work. Seek not the minimum, but the maximum, and you will find that the world will hasten to place its affairs in your hands.
There is no partnership more sacred nor more enduring than that of common knowledge. While we speak of partnerships in the sense of firms and corporations, we must never forget the great partnership of the human mind, which spans the centuries and unites the seeker of today with the sages of the past. It is this shared inheritance of wisdom that forms the true capital of civilization. I have often said, and I repeat it with the conviction of a lifetime's experience, that I would rather give a community a library than any other gift. A library is a fountain that never runs dry. It is a park of the mind where the poorest boy may walk as an equal with the greatest thinkers of all time. It provides the ladders upon which the aspiring can rise from the depths of poverty to the heights of usefulness. A taste for reading is the most valuable acquisition a man can make. When I was a boy in Allegheny, a certain Colonel Anderson, blessed be his memory, opened his small collection of 400 books to the working boys of the neighborhood every Saturday. It was there, among those precious volumes, that the windows of my soul were opened. I saw that there was a world beyond the ironworks and the loom, a world of history, of science, and of high endeavor. That taste for reading did more for me than all the gold I have since acquired, for it allowed me to commune with the best minds of all ages. Through the printed page, I could sit at the feet of Shakespeare, of Burns, and of the great philosophers, receiving from them the inspiration to persevere. In the business of life, general knowledge is the soil, but specialized knowledge is the seed. A man must master the specialty by which he serves his fellows. No one can hope to reach the front rank in any department of human activity unless he becomes an expert in that particular field. Whether it be the making of steel, the building of bridges, or the management of a railway, the partner of the future must be a man who knows more about his branch of the business than anyone else. The library provides the means for this mastery. It allows the young apprentice to study the chemical properties of iron or the laws of mechanics, while his fellows are wasting their hours in idle dissipation. We must understand that knowledge is not a thing to be hoarded for selfish gain, but a tool for public service. The man who masters a specialty does so not merely to enrich himself, but to make the world a more efficient and comfortable place for all. When knowledge is shared, it is not diminished, it is multiplied. By providing libraries, we are not practicing charity, a word I dislike, but rather we are making a wise investment in the character of the people. We are placing the tools of success within the reach of those who have the divine spark of ambition within them. The true partnership of knowledge ensures that no genius remains buried for want of a book. It ensures that the progress of the race is not halted by the ignorance of the many, but accelerated by the enlightenment of the few who lead the way. Therefore, let every young man cherish his books as his most faithful partners. Let him spend his evenings in the company of the great authors, for they will never deceive him, they will never desert him, and they will provide him with the intellectual armor necessary to win the battles of life. In the vast empire of business, the man who knows is the man who leads. We must seek a plan by which we are all in the same boat, for it is only when the interests of the various parties are truly identical that a permanent and harmonious success can be achieved. In the early days of my own manufacturing experience, I perceived that the source of much bitterness lay in the fact that the workman was paid a fixed sum, regardless of whether the product of his labor was sold at a profit or a loss. This created a wall of separation. The owner rejoiced in prosperity, while the worker felt no gain, and in times of adversity, the worker was called upon to suffer, while the owner often attempted to shield his capital at the expense of the hearth. This is not the way of progress. We must labor to create a condition where we are all rejoicing in prosperity together and calling upon our collective fortitude in adversity as members of a single, indivisible family. The sliding scale of wages, based upon the net price received for the product, is the true means of ensuring that capital and labor are shoulder to shoulder. It is the most equitable and the most advanced system yet devised by the mind of man for the regulation of industrial rewards. Under this system, when the market is high and the enterprise is flourishing, the workman's wages rise automatically, granting him a fair share of the wealth he has helped to create without the necessity of a demand or a strike. Conversely, when the market falls and the clouds of depression gather, the workman as a partner accepts a reduced rate, knowing that he is helping the firm to survive the storm and preserve his very employment. He does not feel that he is being crushed by a master, but rather that he is contributing his part to a shared burden. Under such a system, it is impossible for one to defraud the other. The books of the corporation become, in a sense, the ledger of the community. Suspicion, that poisonous weed which chokes the garden of industry, cannot take root when every man knows that his compensation is governed by the same natural laws that govern the profits of the capitalist. There is no room for the walking delegate or the professional agitator when the workman can see for himself that he is receiving the highest wage the business can afford to pay. It brings the light of day into the counting house and the furnace room alike. By this method, the spirit of antagonism gives way to a sense of shared destiny. The workman no longer looks upon the prosperity of the firm with an eye of envy, but with an eye of satisfaction, for he knows that a portion of every dollar added to the firm's treasury finds its way into his own pocket. He becomes a capitalist in spirit, and eventually, through the practice of thrift, a capitalist in fact. We must never forget that the interests of capital and labor are one. He who preaches otherwise is a disturber of the peace. By adopting the sliding scale and the principle of profit sharing, we move closer to that ideal state where the employer and the employed are no longer two conflicting forces, but one united body working for the advancement of themselves and the service of the Republic. It is the realization of the union of hearts, which I have always maintained is the only foundation upon which a lasting industrial peace can be built.
Patience is the hallmark of the successful man. It is the silent partner of character and the guardian of every great fortune. In the feverish air of our commercial centers, there is a temptation to believe that wealth is the result of a sudden stroke of luck or a brilliant momentary dash. I tell you, it is nothing of the kind. Financial independence is a slow result, the fruit of a tree that must be planted in youth and tended with unremitting care through the changing seasons of life. It is not a sudden turn of fortune's wheel, but the steady accumulation of the results of useful labor. The speculator who seeks a quick reward, who dances upon the volatile waves of the stock exchange or gambles upon the fluctuations of the market, is a gamester, not a man of business. He seeks to take from the world without giving anything in return. He desires the harvest without the toil of the plow. Such a man most often dies poor, and what is worse, he leaves the world no better for his having lived. His life is a frantic pursuit of shadows, and when the light of day fades, he has no solid monument of service to show for his years. I have seen many a young man of promise ruined by the desire to get rich quickly. They desert the path of honest industry for the mirage of the easy dollar, only to find themselves stranded in the desert of failure. But the true man of business knows that only by years of patient, unremitting attention to affairs can he earn his reward. He understands that the royal road to success is the long road. He is content to start small, to save his first earnings, and to reinvest them in the tools of his trade. He does not envy the man who makes a sudden killing in the market, for he knows that what is easily gained is easily lost. He builds his house stone by stone,
ensuring that each block is squared by the rule of integrity. This patience is not a passive waiting, it is an active persistence. It is the fortitude to stand by one's purpose when the markets are depressed and the world seems to have lost its courage. I have found in my own life that the moments of greatest trial were the moments that required the most steadfast patience. When we were building the great steelworks at Braddock, there were times when the capital was scarce and the difficulty seemed insurmountable. Had we been speculators, we would have abandoned the task. But we were builders, and we knew that if we remained patient and kept our eyes upon the goal of serving the nation's need for iron and steel, the reward would surely follow. True wealth is the slow accretion of the surplus of one's usefulness. It comes to the man who is willing to wait, to labor, and to grow in wisdom as he grows in means. To the young man I say, do not be in a hurry to be rich. Be in a hurry to be useful. Be in a hurry to master your craft and to earn the trust of your neighbors. If you do this with a patient heart, you will find that the laws of the universe are on your side. Financial independence, when it comes as the result of such a life, is not a burden but a blessing, a tool for greater service and a testament to a life well lived in the service of the human race.
Usefulness to society is the only true measure of wealth. All other standards are but vanity and vexation of spirit. In the final reckoning, the world does not ask how much a man has gathered, but how much he has given. Not what he possessed, but how he served. To gather gear by every wile that's justified by honor is well, and I have never sought to discourage the young man from his natural ambition to excel in the marketplace. It is a noble thing to win the prizes of life through industry, thrift, and superior ability, provided, and this is the vital provision, that the wealth so acquired is used for the public good. The accumulation of millions is a mere beginning. The true test of a man's soul lies in the administration of those millions for the advancement of his fellow creatures. The man who dies rich in money but poor in service dies disgraced. This is the gospel of wealth which I have preached throughout my life. I can imagine no condition more pitiable than that of a man who has spent his years in the frantic pursuit of gold, only to hoard it until the last moment, leaving it behind to be fought over by heirs or distributed by the cold hand of a court. Such a man has missed the highest joy of existence. He has lived as a parasite upon the body of society, taking much and returning little. He passes into the shadows, unwept and unhonored, for he has failed to understand that the privilege of the rich is to be the almoner of the poor. We are but trustees for our poorer brethren. This is the fundamental truth of our industrial age. The great fortunes of our time are not the product of any one man's labor alone. They are the result of the growth of the community, the development of the nation, and the cooperation of thousands of hands. Therefore, the man of wealth has a sacred obligation. He is not the absolute owner of his surplus. He is the temporary steward of a fund that belongs, in justice, to the society that made its accumulation possible. Our highest duty is to administer our surplus for the benefit of the community from which it was gathered, and to do so with the same caution, the same judgment, and the same tireless energy that we applied to its winning. This administration must be wise and discriminating. I do not believe in the charity that merely hands out a pittance to the beggar, for such a course only breeds more beggars and weakens the spirit of independence. The true trustee seeks to help those who will help themselves. He builds libraries, parks, and schools. He provides the means by which the aspiring youth may find his own way to success. He seeks to remove the causes of poverty rather than merely to alleviate its symptoms. In this way, the surplus of the few becomes the inheritance of the many, and the inequalities of fortune are smoothed away by the hand of human sympathy. Let no man think that he must wait until he has millions to begin this service. Usefulness begins in the heart, not the pocketbook. The clerk who gives an hour of his time to encourage a younger lad, or the workman who shares his knowledge with an apprentice, is practicing the very essence of this philosophy. Wealth is but a tool. Service is the hand that guides it. If you wish to be truly rich, seek first to be truly useful. For the man who lives his life as a partner to his community, using his talents and his means to lift the race to a higher plane, has found a treasure that no market crash can ever take away. He lives a life of honor, and when he departs, he leaves behind a world that is brighter because he passed through it. Let us then labor in a spirit of cooperation, for the progress of the race depends upon our union. In this era of civilization, the individual has become less, and the organization has become more. We are bound together by 1,000 invisible threads of mutual interest that no man can sever without bringing injury upon himself and his neighbors. The great manufacturer sitting in his counting house and the man who handles a shovel at the furnace are not inhabitants of two different worlds. They are all members of the same corps, enlisted in the same army, and fighting the same battle against the forces of nature to wrest a comfortable living for mankind. When we look upon the vast improvements in the condition of the people, the better houses, the swifter travel, the abundance of books, we see the results of this cooperation. We must never allow the temporary frictions of the day to blind us to the magnificent harmony of the whole. Whether we occupy the station of the director or the apprentice, our duty is the same, to do our part with a cheerful heart and a steady hand, knowing that the success of the enterprise is the only guarantee of our own. If we hold fast to that which has proved itself good, to the principles of integrity, thrift, and mutual respect, we shall continue our long march upward. This progress is not merely a matter of machinery or money, it is a moral ascent. We are moving toward a day when the rich and the poor are indeed brothers, not through the forced equality of the theorist, which would only drag the best down to the level of the lowest, but through the voluntary action of the successful in using their talents for the benefit of all. It is the day when the man of wealth considers his surplus as a trust, and the man of labor considers his work as a contribution to the commonwealth. In such a state, the envy of the one and the pride of the other will vanish. There is no limit to what may be achieved if we work in harmony. The civilization of the future will be as much superior to our own as our own is to the savage state from which we emerged, provided we remain true to the law of cooperation. We must cast aside the spirit of the combatant and embrace the spirit of the partner. We must seek not to conquer our fellow man, but to conquer the difficulties of life alongside him. By so doing, we ensure that peace and goodwill reign among all men and that the Republic remains the beacon of hope for the world. Let us go forward then, shoulder to shoulder, with a quiet and invincible determination to be of greater use today than we were yesterday, until the work is done and the victory of civilization is complete.